disconnect.
Yeah, we hear you.
John, I'm glad to see I'm not the only one with open PCs all over the place.
I don't know if I would say they're all over the place. There's one or two.
I've got 15 in the office at the moment.
Every now and then I clean up my background, but it doesn't stay cleaned up for very long.
Yeah, I've got like 15 PCs and 2 routers and then 3 racks worth of stuff in the garage.
I think most of the stuff I have, the temps in my garage are too cold for them.
I know they decided that my house was a good point along the route as a backup fiber route, so I just kind of became a lab and a point of presence all in one. It does help.
Oh, really?
You're
You're one of those, huh? Okay.
Well, I've got into my garage now 400 gig of bandwidth.
You know Mr. Lothberg?
Yeah, I think I've got him beat. And if I don't, I'm just waiting for the optics, and I'm gonna, just because I can, shove in 4x400 gig.
Well, I now know if I ever get a bad audio from you, it's not the fault of your connectivity.
Yeah, no, the connectivity works just fine.
It's a last centimeter problem.
I also reserved an entire 10 gig wave to myself going up to the UK, because it's not like we're short of them. And 100 gig NICs in every machine in the house.
So it is already minutes past the hour. I was hoping that Martin would join as well. At least he said so when we talked to him about an hour ago. So why don't we start anyways? We have, I sent an agenda on Friday. There's a couple of things in there that John is going to cover around shepherding and about solo behavior. Those should go relatively quickly. We also have 2 more things that we're going to add. Rashad says he wants to talk about Yang modules and requirements of Yang modules in the working groups. He's going to be a little bit late to the call, so we're going to start with the other stuff, and then we're going to come to him whenever he shows up, if we're at a point where we can start that discussion. And Jeff Haas is going to talk about I'm going to say discovery protocol. And he's going to show some slides, and we're going to go from there and have a discussion in here. But before we start all that, you already saw in the video Andrew Olson, who is now offline. So all that 400 gig times 4 massive bandwidth didn't work. Okay, he's back. So Andrew, as you may have seen, is the new routing AD, or will be the new routing AD, starting in March at the next IETF. So we wanted to, of course, welcome Andrew and dedicate some time for him to introduce himself. And if you guys want to ask questions or make fun of his blip in connectivity there with those 400 gigs to his house, then we
That
can.
was trouble.
So, Andrew, if you want to say something, or we can open the mic. And,
Yeah,
and we're just saying welcome to the team. Thank you.
Yeah, just firstly, thanks, guys. To me, it's an honor to have been selected for the position, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. For those of you who don't know me, I work for an operator out here. I'm based in Nairobi, in Kenya, so nicely situated in the middle of the time zones. Been in the game for, well, a long time, since I was working full-time since I was 16, part-time since I was 12, code in a couple of languages, etc. And now I run an R&D division for the operators, for the operator that I work for. So we spend vast amounts of time implementing drafts as they come and watching for the new tech, etc., so that we can implement it. So I tend to read the stuff anyway, and I really am just looking forward to working with you and getting to know you all. And anyone got any questions for me? Anytime, day or night. I work really strange hours, so I'm pretty much awake 20 hours a day. So yeah, feel free. And that's me.
Great. So if anyone wants to ask anything, take advantage now that he's not yet. And, anything, feel free. If not, his email is somewhere. You can always get a hold of Andrew or any of us at any point. So, John, I'll turn it over to you, and you can talk about your topics.
Okay, should be fairly short. At the last IETF, we had a suggestion that had come out of the sort of joint planning with the IAB and IESG about, let's please remind our participants that, the note well is not just about IPR, it's also about maintaining a civil, or sometimes people say professional, sometimes the word professional is considered to be unclear. But anyway, a civil environment for people to do their work in. And I think we're mostly pretty good at this. But over, we're sort of trying to pay more attention to it. And over the last couple of months or something, have noticed a few things that maybe in the past I wouldn't even have thought necessarily about flagging, but seemed like they were worth mentioning. And it falls under two categories. One is criticizing basically ad hominem kind of comments, like saying, "Oh, your proposal is ugly," or my esteemed colleague has come up with various hacks, and it's unnecessary. It's uncivil. It's a form of insult and not a substantive criticism. And I think that when our participants start moving in that direction, it's our jobs as chairs to say, please find some way of discussing the substance of the proposal, and not just throwing insults. And if all you have is an insult, maybe just remain silent. And the other thing is, we are all adults here, and sometimes we use adult language, but different adults are comfortable around different kinds of adult language. And so it's sort of almost embarrassing to me to say that we should probably try to keep locker room language off the mic, but I think that we should, because you never know who's going to be made uncomfortable by that. And I think that's, it's fair. We shouldn't say you have to be comfortable with swearing in order to participate in the IETF. So those are two things to help remind our participants of during meetings, and that's it for that topic. And I'll pause here in case anybody wants to add anything or question anything. Otherwise, I will go on to the next one, which is going to be super short because the IESG has been doing a revision of the Shepherd write-up template, which hasn't been touched in a good many years. And I thought that was going to be ready and published by this meeting, but it hasn't been. So I guess this is mostly just in terms of a heads up that is coming, and keep it in mind for a future meeting. Just a small preview. The other, apart from the existence of that, and maybe going down it, looking at the changes. The other thing I wanted to mention is it's I think, if I remember right, always been sort of in theory considered to be a best practice to assign a shepherd by the time of working group last call, if not before. And one thing that came up during the discussion of the write-up revision was, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if the shepherd started to do their work either concurrent with or even prior to the working group last call, because a lot of the items that are on the shepherd checklist are also relevant to things that the working group should be reviewing. So it seems like kind of doing the work in the backwards order to say, go through the last call, have the entire working group review the document, then have the shepherd review the document. To my knowledge, this isn't commonly done, but I would like to put it out there that maybe it should be done. And I'd be interested in hearing comments either from people whose working groups actually do work that way and start doing shepherd review prior to working group last call or concurrent with, or I'd also be interested in hearing pushback from, no, John, actually, we shouldn't do it that way for reasons. And I will take that either on the mic right now or, on the list or unicast or any way you want to send it. But please at least think about that. Luigi, please. Not hearing you. I heard the word "I" once.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I think in the past we touched a little bit the shepherding part, and I think, if I remember correctly, we discussed that it would be a really good practice if we assign shepherding or shepherds to the documents actually before the last call, actually helping in polishing the document, because we complained a lot in the past about the fact that documents get out from the working group and the quality sometimes is not the best, with even like still sections marked to be done or something like that. So really someone to help the authors to polish and follow the process. Not that we do it actually in my working group, it is a bad habit, but I think it's a good idea. That's it. I wanted to share this. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess a related point is just, on the subject of shepherd recruitment, I know that it's, very common for chairs to just take on the shepherding job themselves. And I just want to point out that it is a useful way or potentially useful way to bring people into the process, is to say, oh, you want to become sort of more involved in IETF leadership, here's a really good way is to shepherd this document for me. And the chair can still review and participate in the shepherding process, but maybe not have to do all the work themselves. So, a point to consider, especially sort of in tandem with the, oh, you're interested in being involved, shepherd something for me, and by the way, maybe do it during the or prior to the working group last call. Okay, thank you. That's it for my topic. Unless anybody else wants to contribute a comment.
I don't see anyone else. So, Jeff, I think we're now ready for you. You're going to share some slides. Is that true?
But before I move forward, can everybody hear me?
I don't know about everybody, but I can hear you.
Yep. You'll count. Second here as I find the right slides. Okay. All right. Can somebody see my slides?
Yes, we can.
I see them. You might put them into presentation mode.
Okay, let's see if that actually eats my screen or not. 1 second. Yes, that indeed ate my Meet Echo screen, which is why I did not do it.
All right. Sorry, never mind.
So, no, it's fine. Just tell me if there's any chat messages. I won't be able to see them while I'm in presentation mode. Okay, so.
Okay, well, Jeff.
Yes?
What we are seeing now is 4 thumbnails.
Thrilling. I hate Microsoft.
Anybody on the call from Microsoft?
I blame Microsoft for much. We don't have enough time for that. Okay, so what is this? This is a request for some generalized discussion, and maybe this will lead us to a BOF or something else, or maybe somebody will just say, this is a solved problem. No, we don't need to do anything here. One of the things that I've been seeing over the course of sets of my work, much of it BGP, is that we have some need for what I'm going to be calling a generalized capability discovery tool. And you can swap the word capability for feature. What you think about such things, I think, depends on what technology suite you're sitting inside of. So what do I consider the problem? I think that one of the headaches we have to deal with regularly, especially as our technologies continue to mature and add new stuff, is that incrementally deploying new features is challenging in a network. We all know this. We try to avoid flag days, and as a consequence, we have portions of our network that do or do not support some new capability, some new feature. And part of the problem is what's sort of the minimal threshold to get something deployed, for whatever your definition of deployment means, and for technologies that require sets of boxes to be connected together, supporting the same feature to get its job done. Are these boxes actually connected in such a way? And if they require interaction with external devices like a controller, especially for programmed cases, does the controller have sufficient visibility into what's going on in the network to get its job done? So very clearly, routing protocols have a lot of the stuff that we're looking for. We do see this in a lot of protocols in terms of what they do for incremental deployment, but the more generalized case isn't necessarily dealt with as part of that. And programming, I think, is one of the key things that leads us to the problem, but it's certainly not alone. Picking 2 easy use cases, maximum segment depth was a bit of discussion that we had, which led to 2 very simple RFCs. The general idea there is if you're using technology for steered traffic, maybe using MPLS, your label stacks can be the tool that you want to get the job done. But since many devices don't support arbitrary depth for a label stack, well, that becomes problematic. Now, how do you know if you can steer something through a specific node in your network if it has a limited stack depth? What is that depth? And knowing what that is at some point in the network, maybe you can adjust your technology to do the appropriate thing. I'm having a specific example of this sort of headache with BGP flow spec. Even the sort of very boring core RFC type stuff isn't 100% supported in some cases. The easy example of that is a lot of implementations don't have support for doing matches on the DSCP fields inside of IP packets or being able to set them. And the consequence is that if you're doing flow spec in a deployment where the BGP routes are just being sort of flooded everywhere to all flow spec capable devices, well, that means that since flow spec has implicit rule ordering, if you don't support matching on a field or it ignores matching in the field, your filtering intent may not be done as you expect, and that can result in things like the traffic getting thrown away because of how flow spec is being deployed, or maybe that's intended to be your safety bar, and stuff that's allowed to pass through based on a given DSCP may not be getting handled. And we're starting to see that headache creep up as we're starting to add new flow spec features. We've been sort of on pause as we've been doing the update to the original flow spec RFC, and that work is starting to creep forward again. So easy example, my employer has a feature that allows us to filter on the contents of packets rather than just simply the header fields. Well, what happens in your deployment if your devices don't consistently support this? It's not reasonable for them to. It's a heavy-duty feature. So how do you figure out in your protocol how they deal with this? So that's some discussion we've had in IDR as an example. So motivations for the more general conversation. Now we do have mechanisms for, what we need is mechanisms to discover, the devices, how they're hooked up together, what their capabilities are, and as we all know, routing protocols do a lot of this stuff for us already, depending on their flavor. And picking an easy example, IGPs are usually in an excellent position to share a lot of this type of information. They have, here's the device, here's the topology that they're hooked up into, and the protocols are very extensible. You can stick more and more stuff in there, which means theoretically you can just sticky note all of your appropriate capability information in there that could be carried across your entire network. But there's very obvious reluctance to try to do that because it overloads the IGP itself and sort of degrades its core use case. Picking a different example, BGPLS does a lot of the same sort of things that the IGP does. Different encodings, has the advantage that can be interdomain, has some of the same encoding overheads that an IGP does. But the nice thing is it's not an IGP. We do have the flexibility to stick more things in there, and we have a lot of opportunity to use that as an extensible thing. And this is not to say that BGPLS is the answer. It's just a useful talking point about stuff that we do have that can potentially be repurposed there. So the question becomes, what do we need? Is it one of our existing solutions for this? Do we need something brand new? Or maybe this isn't really a problem, it's just all in my head. This is where I pause and open up discussion. AC.
Well, one of the reasons we've done this is because it rides on top of all the machinery in the routing protocols, right? And the the security's there, everything's there. So I don't think inventing something, I'm not saying whether we should limit this to one way of doing it, but I don't know that I would think inventing something new would be a good idea. It would be years and years before it was done, for one thing. And we have the requirements right now, right? Or at least, I don't know if we have the requirements for everything that's being proposed, but we certainly have drafts that purport that we do. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And sort of hitting John's point in chat, which is the pointer to the traditional XKCD cartoon. Nice thing about standards is there's so many of them. We can certainly add one. There's a lot of pressure to maybe do it in existing technologies. And I think the concern I have is if you push to use an existing technology, you're also running into the politics with the technology. Just to pick on the IGPs, just because you're the speaker, You know, we've seen this conversation over and over again of this is a cool thing to do, but please don't stick this in IGP. It doesn't help the core use case. So we keep on running into these sort of mismatches. Andrew.
Yeah, so from my perspective, look, we use a lot of BGP LS, a lot. And it does seem to me that LS, if you could find a way to get information into it, would be a very good place to put this. The problem then becomes, how do you get the additional information into LS? And particularly because the LS deployments out there are pretty inconsistent as it is with what they carry, in my experience. So to me, this almost seems like the ideal solution would be to use LS where you needed to distribute, into domain or whatever else, but then you still need a mechanism to get the stuff into LS. And you don't want loads and loads of LS speakers, so it's got to be distributed somehow. And I think that, to me, is where it comes down to, because the LS makes sense, but how do you get it in there? And that is kind of my sticking point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And of course, LS has its own sort of standalone use cases. So, for some networks, people might object to having all this extra state stuck onto the BGP NLRI that carries around the stuff for LS. But one of the nice things about BGP, at least for this type of use case, it's possible to have multiple instances of the stuff running that don't necessarily cross with each other. As an example, there's a VPN flavor of BGP-LS that would let us have basically a standalone instance for the state declaration that doesn't have to live in the same use cases for other things you use LS for. So the protocol is capable of handling that. Again, I'm not saying LS has to be the answer. But I guess one of the other observations here is maybe an indirect functional point that needs to be solved as we work on this thing, if we decide to pick up the work, is we need to have a generic way of getting stuff in and out of it. Those of you who spent a lot of time in a lot more modern software development environments are used to using message buses that are key value stores. Maybe the answer is we have all these things that are used to pass around topology like LS. We have basically structured key values that we'd want to attach to things. Maybe the functional requirement is we need a way to glue these things together so it's very easy to get a streaming version of what's the capability set attached to the network. Joel, did you want to take the comment to Mike?
Yes, I might as well. There's a real question. Well, if we want a way to get to this information and collect it, then we obviously have to distribute it in the IGP. But we have to distribute it in the domain, not necessarily in the IGP. We have years and years ago demonstrated one can take the IGP information distribution technology, pull it out of the IGP, even create some collectors so the topology doesn't have to be the same as the IGP topology, and use it to manage information. Now, the problem we used it for, which was NHRP, turned out to be irrelevant. That happens. You can do that. But then I stop and think about it. If I really want to distribute this information and I need it collected, is it really better to define a new protocol to do that, or should I just put it in the IGP? So it's a trade-off. I mean, if we want to do it, clearly we can, but we'd have to do something different. It's just a trade-off that I think we need to keep in mind. But we do know how to do this. It's not like it's magic.
Understood. Again, it's one challenge of not overloading existing use cases. I think LS has a little bit more flexibility to carry additional stuff without necessarily being disruptive. AC, would you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I've been one that's been kind of in the middle, especially when it's not a big volume of information or it's a node property where I'm not, or interface property that's a really small amount. I have been, but I know we have our strong working group members who are against anything that isn't used for routing or segment routing or whatnot that goes into the IGP. Now, in both ISIS and OSPF, ISIS, they went ahead and finished it. OSPF, I'm the main author of it. We do have a completely separate mechanism that makes use of the IGP, but nobody's been really interested in implementing it. I mean, that's why I haven't pushed it forward. It actually even supports the concept, because you don't need, it has nothing to do with forwarding. You can even support remote neighbors without tunneling. And then you could have topologies much like BGPLS, where you only had to advertise the stuff to the people who needed it. But we haven't had a lot of people excited about it.
And I understand the lack of excitement. The problem is we've had a lot of use cases that seem to want to use this stuff, but we almost always end up seeming to solve it within our own technology domains. Pick on FlowSpec as the example.
And we have, well, not only that, they don't want to use something, they just want their application. Let's just put it in both the router capabilities, which is, both ISIS and OSPF have those. And just for this one, this is something everybody needs anyway. And people have said this is something everybody needs, when it turns out it's just a few select routers in the domain. They still try and push it forward. Maybe if we had an unlimited offer list, and we could put these people on the transport OSPF, that's what it's called, OSPF transport instance, they would all be happy to support it.
Okay, that was a technology I didn't know that was there, and it's worth adding to the bucket list.
Yes.
John.
So, a few comments. Let me start by riffing on what AC was just saying, which is that one of the problems we have, I think, probably in trying to replace expedient but maybe not, ideal technologies with like, quote, the right thing, unquote, is that you've got the question of who goes first, right? You could easily imagine some kind of a dialogue that goes like, it's not ideal the way you're trying to abuse the IGP or BGP or whatever protocol. Please use this fully generic one instead. The answer is, it's incredibly unfair that that you're insisting that I have to go to this huge amount of extra trouble to get this new protocol implemented and deployed, whereas everybody who came before me didn't have to. So there's a real chicken and egg problem there. Second kind of closely related one is touched off by what Joel was saying about, it's relatively easy and expedient to add these things to the IGP or again to BGP. And it's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back problem that we're talking about, right? It's like every now and then it gets asserted that that the camel's back is going to be broken if we keep putting unrelated but easily added things into it, right? I remember well over a decade ago it was being claimed that if we added one more thing to BGP, the internet was going to stop working. It hasn't stopped working yet, and we haven't stopped adding stuff, but the argument still has some validity. And final point is that I think we're kind of talking about inventing a dump truck protocol, right? A message bus for everything that isn't part of core IGP or core BGP, but still needs to be distributed, right? And there's a little bit of a marketing problem with that, in that I fear that people may react to that as like, well, my thing is important, so my thing should go into the IGP. My thing is not, the dump truck protocol is for unimportant things. So none of these are insurmountable, but I think they're all, kind of organizational or psychological things that we have to consider if we're actually, wanting to make progress on fixing this problem, which we haven't yet agreed that we're going to try to do. But
Exactly. The whole point is that they try to figure out, do other people see this as a problem worth solving? And sort of hitting Andrew's point from chat, telemetry is a way to get this stuff out. Every one of our protocols has some way of listing out its optional features. That's how we incrementally deploy our individual protocols. But right now, there's no way to basically query, all the nodes in your network. What are your lists, so I can build these things up? And that helps me with all the different types of problems that are on the slides. So, theoretically, an example of a very lightweight feature for doing this sort of thing is everybody supports some flavor of standardized telemetry, where you could poke a port, get the full answer of here's the capabilities list in a nice standardized data model, and all you need is, give me the list of all the devices in the network that I can ask this question to. So that's an option, but again, goes to yet another protocol in the mix. And as you're sort of hitting as a point, yes, this is a dump truck protocol. It's intended for who knows what. It has a use case that I've given. But the interesting challenge is going to be, I think, is the key one, the ecosystem problem. If I have a BGP implementation, that's probably where I'm going to want to put the stuff. If I'm doing IGP work, maybe that's where I want to put it. So that's why I leave that. Perhaps we need something else. It's not so much that I think we need something else. The question is, how do we actually maximally address the problem if we decide to do it, and what ecosystem does it live in? So I feel like the questions are slowing down. This was not intended to be a comprehensive thing. This may turn into something like a BOF if we decide it's a worthwhile problem to solve. This is mostly to draw your attention to being a potentially interesting thing, and go from there.
Thanks, Jeff. So I guess for now we're done with your topic, right? And we'll come back if we need to at some point. So now next we have Rashad, who's already standing at the mic. Go ahead, Rashad.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is, I don't have much to say unless, except it's a question. So now that, most of the Yang in the routing area have, with the initial Yang anyway, have been published as RFCs or will soon be RFC bis. So the question really is, when we start new documents, what should we do regarding Yang for those new features or whatever of the protocols? So I think at the minimum, me as a contributor, I ask myself the question, should I be adding Yang to this document? Whether it's for manageability or whether it's needed from a security perspective to limit to limit the attack surface or that kind of stuff. So that's as a contributor, and then got me thinking as a, whether as a co-chair or, for the whole area, is that a question we should be asking for each document? Should we be encouraging it, or do we not care? Or that's basically the question to the group. AC.
If somebody put the Yang in a new document, I'd certainly be supportive of that, but I don't know that we should require it. Some of the things we have, it's hard enough to get them, reviewed, implemented, and everything without putting this additional bar on it. And it reminds me a lot about bug commit criteria or feature commit criteria. If anybody's ever, I know a lot of you have done mostly IETF for your careers, but if you've ever worked for a vendor and you know about this, people who don't do any commits, they keep putting additional criteria to commit a change or a feature and all these things. And the thing is, everybody ends up getting exceptions anyway because they don't have the skills to do that. It's too big a thing rather than dividing it and conquering it. So I don't know. I don't think we should have a hard and fast requirement for this, and it all depends on the size of it. You want to put it in one document and require it, you're going to really delay what's already a little bit of a slow process to get things published.
Yeah, so I'm okay with that line of thinking, but at least I'd like the question to be asked personally, as opposed to, well, Yang is a pain, so let's not do it. Jeff?
IDR is not quite to the point of having its first full version done for the BGP model, but it's getting darn close. Once that's done, it's still only going to cover a core set of the features. And I think that's pretty much true for most of the big protocols that we got modules for. Don't care which module you pick, it's probably not 100% covering all the different incremental features that are in there. So this partially goes to the question of what do we do about all those gaps? Is it expected that at some point the working group picks up and sticks those all in the model as optional extensions? And that moves into the carry-through piece that you're asking about. If you're writing a new feature, should you require them to actually do that incremental bit of work? And is it fair to ask them to do that if we have uncovered pieces of optional code?
Yeah, I mean, if there's big gaps, then definitely that's a difficult one to push unless it's really it covers, it belongs to the core set of features, in extension to that which you mentioned. But yeah, can't disagree there. Alvaro?
Thanks, Rashad. So it's hard to come up with one answer that is going to fit everyone, of course. So there are requirements that we have with drafts and RFCs where we need to have security considerations and things like that. We can't not do security if we're going to do something. At least we need to consider security, right, when we're doing something. To me, your question is more, should we consider management a requirement? Not necessarily a requirement in terms of you can't publish your extension unless you have management, because I agree with AC in that putting too many requirements is going to delay, it's going to not have the feature come out. Maybe the functionality is more important in the short term, as long as there is some work that is coming, right? As long as the module is going to come. And some approach like that, right? In requiring management, just like we require other things, but allowing publication in a staggered way, is what seems appropriate to me. Of course, it depends on the working group, right? As Jeff just said, BGP hasn't published the main module. There's a lot of catch up to be done. There are other working groups, Roll, for example, Manet, that don't have even Yang modules, and where Yang might not be the right place, the right way to do some of the management in those types of environments. But so in my mind, we sort of need to go back to every working group, trying to decide with a strong push towards requiring the augmentation or the putting all the new features in the modules at some point.
Yep, makes sense. I mean, I agree. There's no one answer for everything. It's just what my concern was, that it being Yang, we've done, IETF routing area, we've done so much effort, spent so much cycles on doing Yang for the past few years, that it'd be, okay, we've done it, let's move on, and then we're going to have this huge gap again, this growing gap. That was my concern, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. AC?
You know, and I know you've reviewed a lot of them, and you know what the models in routing look like, and a lot of them are pretty complex. You take the BGP, the OSPF, or the multicast MLDP model. They are not for the faint of heart. Now, I don't think everybody who wants to submit a proposal is going to be able to modify them. I mean, this is, are we going to keep them from doing it? I don't think we can do that. Like Alvaro says, they're just too much. And the last thing I want to say about this is we have started doing augmentations to pick up some of the features we missed, either because they weren't far enough along, or we were too far along in the review process for the main modules. So a subset of the offers have some augmentations for features that we missed. And will we ever be right in step? No, we won't. But we're trying to, do the best we can with especially the important features.
Okay. Don?
I was just going to say, I think it depends on the size of the Yang that you want to do. If you're doing a draft and you do a small, addition augment or something, that may be fine. But what we're finding in the IEEE with Yang in there is you have the Yang modules may be changing faster than the text is. So you've got this problem that an updating problem of, once you've included it, now you've got a different maintenance cycle on it. So that's the thing to be wary of.
Okay. Yeah, so all I wanted, Alvaro, is bring it up, have a discussion, all good points. So I'm good.
So that it seems to me that your question is important, and what I would like to propose, I think we all agree that one size doesn't fit all, and it depends, and different working groups are at different places of the cycle of getting the module, or trying to catch up, of working on some documentations. I would suggest that we need to take Yang seriously and have a plan, or be aware of the potential need for something. And every working group is going to be different. So what I want to ask each pair or group of chairs is to think about what this means in your working group. And it may be completely different from what a different working group needs, just because of where you are. But at least, consider that. Rob Wilton in the IESG makes the point of asking for every draft that is produced, what about management? And where's the Yang module? And many times the answer is, well, we don't have one. Sometimes it's nice that we can actually point to something that it is moving as fast as the main draft, but that at least we know the working group is working on something. The fact that he asked is just a question, is a non-blocking question, but it's something to keep in mind that there's other people outside us who are also thinking about this.
Okay, thank you.
So we ran out of agenda. It is still 12 to the top of the hour. If anyone has anything that you want to talk about, please do so now. Nope. Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. This was recorded, so it should automatically be posted somewhere, hopefully soon. And we'll see everyone in the next chat at the beginning of March. Thank you so much.